You got plenty of the hotel, just about that one.
Cool. It's good to see you.
You too. We'll catch up in a little bit.
an Avis note, or a handwritten note written by my Granny Tash, or a small trinket that sparks a vivid memory, and in that moment, I remember these things are the quiet threads that stitched my story together. And if it wasn't for the work of y'all, archivists, historians, that remind us that all our stories matter. Thank you all for the work you do.
I'm John Lawrence, and on behalf of Joyner Library Special Collections, I want to thank you all for coming. We're honored to host you this week. And this week, we're also blessed with the beginning of 5 of our 6 first construction projects since COVID. So we hope you'll bear with us. Please excuse our mess. While you're here, I hope you will take the time to explore our building. It really up to the top. Okay. And our spaces as best you can. And as you walk around, you'll see why I say that. Patrick Cash and John Dunning have prepared a delightful exhibit on World War II and the participation of this region in that war effort. And the exhibit is cleverly stretched over 3 different floors. So if you go and follow it to the end, you'll get to see a lot of our spaces. And the tours tomorrow will help you see more. As preservers of the past, you know that we are living in challenging times. In just the past 4 months, people in leadership positions have questioned the need to publicly commemorate the work of Harriet Tubman, Medgar Evers, Jackie Robinson, and 4 young men from North Carolina A&T at a Woolworths counter in Winston-Salem, in Greensboro. And so sometimes, even in good years, when we're processing mounds of material, it's easy to question our career choices and that we have made over the years. However, if anything, the barrage of challenges have demonstrated the genuine importance of what we do. The stories of Emma Dupree, Buck Leonard, Hayes Pond, the Stonewall Inn, and many others deserve to be remembered, preserved, and shared with others. Through your collections, you are guardians of a universe where every life, every story matters. You should be proud of your work that you do each and every day. I thank you for your work, and I reiterate, we are truly honored to have you here today. Now, let me invite back to the stand the individual who has literally supervised every detail of this conference, Patrick Cash.
I'm not Patrick, sorry. I was in issues last year. If you were with us in Raleigh, the State Archives for our 40th anniversary. Welcome to SNCA 41 here at ECU. I am the president of SNCA, Josh Hager, and I'm also the Records Description Unit head at the State Archives in Raleigh. This year's theme is for engagement in a digital world. And I think that's really critical because in a digital world, things are ephemeral. Things move away very quickly. And what we as archivists can do is present something tangible and real. We have records, manuscripts, photographs, texts that actually document the lives of people, their real experiences, their stories. And everything in our holdings is somebody's story. That's the real connection. We can make tangible, relevant, resonant connections with communities across our state through our holdings and through sharing that with those communities that need to see it and working with communities to preserve their own history. And in this world where AI can make us question if anything is real, misinformation is so rampant, it is so critical that we in this field and in this place and time continue to make and foster those connections. And I'm so happy that we are here this week to try to further that work. I do want to thank our sponsors for this year's conference. From the Page, University Products, ECU College of Education Library Science, Hollinger Metal Edge, NC Live, Archival Methods, Aviary, and the C. Smith Reynolds Library at Wake Forest University. Please join me in thanking them for their support for the conference this year. And now it is my honor to start our awards presentation. We have a few awards to give before our keynote speaker. I'd like to first recognize our development chair, Chante Alvarez, to join me in granting the development awards.
Good morning, everyone. As Josh said, my name is Shante Alvarez. I am an archivist at Elon University. I would first like to situate myself, so bear with me. Give me another second. So I will begin with the Michelle Francis Scholarship Award recipients. This year we were fortunate to have two applicants, so we were able to award two scholarships in the amount of $250. If you're unfamiliar, the Francis Scholarship provides professional development funding for early career or for archivists in their early career who may not otherwise be able to attend the conference due to limitations at their institutions. So our first recipient this year is Sherry Miller. Sherry is now the permanent archivist at the Western Regional Archives in Asheville, North Carolina. We are very grateful that Sherry was able to join us this year. Help me congratulate Sherry.
Does anyone want to take a picture? Thank you. We didn't think about that part.
Our second recipient is Terrell Wilson. Terrell is a local person. He is right here in also working in Joyner Library and also at the Health Sciences Library. Terrell, congratulations. Please join me. Lastly, I'd like to read a few comments about the recipient of our Thornton W. Mitchell Service Award, or as I like to say, the SNCA Lifetime Achievement Award. I will summarize a few comments from this year's nominator. Our recipient has around 25 years of archival work. This person has partnered on many student-centered projects. She is described as the opposite of a gatekeeper. Our nominator said, "I'm always amazed how she welcomes students and gives them opportunity to work with materials hands-on. Those days that the students in his class visit her unit are their favorite days." In her unit, our recipient encourages her team members to take on field experiences, internships, and other paid positions for burgeoning archivists. She teaches adjunct courses at SILS, staying on top of the fields, particularly with regard to arrangement and description. Our recipient has done good work for archival science at large. She teaches the DAX courses at SAA. She's well known for her conscious editing initiative, for which she published an article and accompanying guidelines that are highly cited, and a project that is highly copied by other institutions. She's also very grounded in North Carolina, having worked at several of our institutions and having completed her MSLS at UNC. So now the SNCA Development Committee is proud to award the 2025 Thornton W. Mitchell Service Award to Jackie Dean. Not here yet. We will be sure to award Jackie. Hopefully she will join us later. All right, thank you.
Oh, well. And now I'd like to bring up Marlena Rose for our education awards. Sorry, we'll be giving out our education awards at the business meeting tomorrow. My apologies.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll bring it back to Patrick.
Thank you, Josh. All right, so now for the reason everyone's here, our wonderful keynote speaker. Just a little background. So when we initially planned to bring this conference to ECU this year, we reached out and wanted to partner with NARA, and was successful in obtaining a keynote speaker who was a senior administrator at NARA and overseeing their digital outreach program. And unfortunately, as you all know, the changes that happened in NARA over the last couple months, that person was told they were not allowed to come because of SNCA's mission statement, and it didn't meet the current standards that NARA was being forced to uphold. So that was in March. Conferences were in May. So when you get an email in March saying, hey, the keynote speaker's not coming, you kind of lose it and get stressed and freak out a little bit. But luckily, one thing I've learned is when you surround yourself with good friends and good people, you keep them close. And our keynote speaker today is one of my best friends from my professional career, colleague from graduate school. So he was the immediate call when I knew I needed someone. So our keynote speaker today, and it's my honor to introduce him, and that is Mr. Inslee Guffey. And Inslee, if you'll join me up here, please. Inslee Guffey is the archivist for the Catawba Nation. He holds an MA in history from East Tennessee State University, where he was the second best student in the program, and an NLS with a concentration in archives and special collections from UNC Greensboro. A historian of American popular culture and historical memory studies, he has presented at a variety of national and international academic conferences and conventions, and has published peer-reviewed articles on a variety of pop culture productions and the use of historical memory in contemporary America. He is also the co-author of Wanna Cook, the complete unofficial companion to Breaking Bad, and A Dream Given Form, the unofficial guide to the universe of Babylon 5. Inslee lives on traditional lands of the Catawba Nation and within the modern nation's federally recognized service area in Shelby, North Carolina, with his wife and co-author, Kay Del Kuntz, and their 4 feline overlords. So please join me in welcoming my friend and my colleague, Mr. Inslee Guffey. Let me figure out how to do this. Should be. Maybe not. Oh, yes, it's in.
Or no. Okay, I can do it by hand. It's no big deal. Tanake ni tempt. Yuak kure. Niat Inslee Guffey ye Iswang archivist. Morning, everybody. My name's Inslee Guffey, and I'm the archivist for the Catawba Nation. I have some thank yous at first. First, hello to the Tuscarora people. We are all of us currently on the traditional homelands of the Tuscarora people of North Carolina and this entire area. So hello to them for their continued stewardship of the land and the natural resources that we consume. Hello to SNCA for having me. Hello to Patrick for reaching out, and hello to you all for being here this morning. So I'm using a little bit of Catawba, which is technically considered a dead language. However, for the past 40 years, the Catawba have kept it alive in very small ways. People recording the talks of their grandparents and great-grandparents, noting bits of grammar here and there. And as someone who works at the Catawba Cultural Center, we have a language department that is heavily involved with the language revitalization program. Just published the first ever standardized Catawba dictionary earlier this year. So we're bringing the language back. We have curricula now up through middle school, and Catawba education programs are hopefully bringing up a new generation of the first fluent Catawba speakers since Chief Samuel Taylor Blue died in 1969. So since we're working all this labor stuff, we'll teach you guys a little bit of Catawba. Sorry, this is not my laptop. Okay, we'll use the mouse. Okay, so Tanake. That's Tanake. Yes. Okay. Hawu. That's thank you. That's what I'm doing. Just have you Hawu. Kate, which is see you later. Say that again. Get back right back. Kate with Catawba don't say goodbye. Like a lot of callers, they don't say goodbye. They'll see you later. And then one of my favorites, Wickede, which means be quiet. It's like saying someone got to sneeze. So next time you hear somebody sneeze, you can tell them to be quiet. Wickede. So it's odd because sometimes it works. It's like the whole thing of, when somebody's sneezing, you go, think about an elephant. And then for whatever reason, that brain connection gets where, be quiet. And then they stop sneezing. So my plan today is to stay on time and to first give you a very brief overview about Catawba Nation, the Catawba people, then get into the Catawba Nation archives, which I'm the archivist, and with kind of a focus on the meeting's theme of digital engagement and what we've been doing in that regard since I've been lucky enough to work with the Catawba Nation. And then at the end, I'll be happy to take any questions, not just about the archives. If you have any questions about the Catawba Nation, I'll be happy to do my best to answer those, although I don't know everything, obviously. So, the Catawba homelands have changed. Surprise, surprise. About 1500 CE, you see there, it was pretty much the entire Piedmont of North and South Carolina, down towards the South Carolina coast and up into Southern Virginia. This was, take this map with a grain of salt. Reconstructing the historic homelands of the pre-Columbian era is difficult. A lot of our sources of Catawba, of course, are an oral tradition people. There was a written language. That's why the Catawba words that you're saying is English with various diacritical marks, or rather the Latin text with the diacritical marks. But that is roughly about right. The current Catawba service area, which is the federal mandated area where Catawba citizens can expect service from the Catawba Indian Nation government, is the entirety of South Carolina and 5 counties in North Carolina. So that is kind of representative. With the Treaty of Augusta of 1763, the Catawba homelands in exchange for giving up claims to any other lands was reduced to 144,000 acres around what is now primarily York and Lancaster counties in South Carolina, just south of Charlotte. You will note the right angle in the reservation up there from that map from the 40s. So that was theoretically the Catawba Reservation through 1840. However, due to squatters, the refusal of first the colonial and then the American governments to enforce Catawba land rights, the land was slowly eaten away till 1840. The state of South Carolina tried to enforce an illegal treaty because states can't make treaties with tribes. Tribal nations are sovereign governments. Only the federal government can do that. In exchange for some money and help resettling, the Catawba gave up all their claims. And then, of course, the state didn't follow through with the money of the resettling. So thanks to a very generous landholder on the reservation lands, Catawba survivors came back about 630 acres. And then 2022, those 2 little black marks from the Google Maps version there, that was the reservation at the time. We added about 400 acres to that now. And you'll also notice again the 90-degree angle, which is now the state line between North and South Carolina, because they're dividing Carolina into 2. North Carolina wanted to make sure they never would have anything to do or to have to deal with Catawba. So they drew the state line right on the reservation line, and that's why we have that perfect 90-degree angle in the state, because North Carolina very wisely decided they had enough to deal with Cherokee. So that is kind of how the Catawba homes have shrunk. And that's where we are today. However, the Catawba are still here, still in the traditional lands. The reservation's right outside of Rock Hill, South Carolina. You're welcome to come. The Cultural Center is open 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday. Come hang out. We have great walking trials, fantastic exhibits, and you can learn a lot about the Catawba people. What has allowed the Catawba to survive, because we're talking about a people that obviously were surrounded very early by settlers. And there were horrific periods where the population declined to the point, for example, the Trail of Tears. South Carolina decided they didn't want to spend the money to put the Catawba out and send them out west because they figured there were so few of them, they were probably going to die off anyway. So there have been points where the population fell dangerously low, but the Catawba have always survived. And they've done so primarily through the preservation of their culture. We have some friends and people I work with pictured here doing traditional, this is the women's fancy dance, traditional Catawba dance. This is Mojave Bryson, who is the sweetest woman you will ever meet, who is also one of our tremendous and talented potters. She remembers when the first running water came to the reservation in 1964. So she also attended the Cherokee boarding school in Cherokee, North Carolina, which by and large at that point had Cherokee boarding school was a lot better than places like Carlisle. There is a Catawba buried at Carlisle. He was, I believe, 6 years old when he died of vaccination fever and was buried at Carlisle. We worked through NAGPRA, the Native American Indian Graves Registration Act, to bring Wade Harris, is his name, bring him home. But when they opened up the grave, he wasn't there. It was a body of about a 14-year-old female. So either they weren't paying that much attention in the original burial, or when they moved all the Native American graves to make way for building, sometime in the 20th century, I think, it was Army Corps of Engineers, they weren't terribly careful about matching headstones at bodies. So we weren't able to bring Wade home. So you get into that whole boarding school horror story as well. So, but Catawba culture stayed alive. The pottery tradition is the oldest unbroken pottery tradition in North America. Catawba potters today still make pottery in the same way that their ancestors did 6,000 years ago, which is the coil method. They are still using clay from a clay hole by the Catawba River that has been being dug for 500 years. The Catawba don't use kilns, they don't use wheels, and they produce some incredibly beautiful works of pottery. It started, of course, as utilitarian, but nowadays it's worldwide recognized as an incredible ceramic art form. And potters like Mojave have been absolutely essential in passing down this art. And that's how the Catawba survived, generation to generation. Mothers teaching daughters, fathers teaching sons, families carrying on traditions into the present day. And that is kind of our mission at the Archives and the Catawba Cultural Center, which is where I work. That building that we're in, the basement, was built in the 40s by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which a lot of Catawbas belong to. When the LDS came to Rock Hill, they were literally running uptown on the rail. But they found sanctuary at the reservation and began doing their missionary work there. And the chief at the time was a convert. And since then, the Catawbas have been very active in LDS. And most of the Catawba genealogy that we have survived, has been done through the LDS Church. So that becomes a very important resource. And in fact, the stake in York County is unusual because it has a family records center, which most states do not. And a lot of that is Catawba. So, but anyway, that building was built by the Mormon Church for the Catawba as a schoolhouse because the Catawbas could not attend public schools in South Carolina until mid-60s, around when the desegregation was happening for everyone. Yes, so the Catawbas, Native Americans weren't allowed to attend public schools in South Carolina at that point either. So that is the historic building we're in. It was moved from its original site behind the Mormon Church in 1990 and refurbished by tribal members. Yes, there was no money at that point. So all the electrical work, everything And the archives is in the basement. So, Catawba Nation Archives, primary mission, preserving, protecting, and promoting Catawba history and cultural heritage. We are a multimedia archives. I got documents. I have media in various formats from, wire recordings, wire recording things. I've got reel, I've got, oh my God, DAT tapes. I have VHS, beta, all that kind of stuff. We have traditional arts, lots of pottery, I have feathers, I have skins, buck skins, regalia. So a variety of materials that we have to figure out how to take care of and how to preserve so that people can see them and the Catawba can check out the works of their ancestors, microfilm, all that kind of stuff. So a big part of it going forward has been, okay, how do we get this very physical material stuff out there in a way, in a digital world, where Catawbas around the world, because not all Catawbas live on the reservation, not all Catawbas live in South Carolina. There are large populations actually in Utah and Ohio, just to name a couple. I have some users of our website in Germany, for that matter. Catawbas, like most Native Americans, have an incredible record of service in the armed forces. So they're all around the world. So how do we bring these artifacts to the people digitally? That has been a big push for me. So I do want to say that tribal archives are a little bit different than standard archives. Not a whole heck of a lot. One thing I do want to underline is that cultural activities do not receive BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs funding. BIA is by far the largest federal grantor and funder for Native American organizations, but cultural activities do not receive BIA funding. So it is a grants, you get to eat what you kill kind of situation for us. I am working now trying to have the archives become we don't have enough to be a true records repository, we just don't have that kind of space, but to be the archives for government records, in part because that does give the archives a line into that BIA funding. Because at that point we are doing a government service rather than a cultural service. But the primary purpose of the archives is cultural, to preserve and promote that cultural heritage, to be part of that tradition that has allowed the Catawbas to thrive for 6,000 years. Our mission multimedia collections. We do have some interesting access restrictions. There are family lines, is the big one. The Catawba do not have plans, are not organized along those lines like some Native American tribes are. But there are certain words and certain items and songs that are seasonal. That are sacred and brought out by certain people at certain times. So you have some interesting restrictions that you have to deal with and to be able to navigate and to realize that are there. So that are a little bit different sometimes from standard archives. Rematriation, the Catawba are matrilineal and matrilocals. Rematriation or repatriation is the word usually here. This is dealing with outside repositories to either bring Catawba materials home or to arrange co-curation. We also do digital rematriation. It's not rematriation. But working on agreements, getting to know people, working with people, networking with other institutions to, if not bring artifacts home to Catawba, then to work with those institutions to go beyond. If you've ever, and most of you probably have at some point, been going through some 1938 anthropological article where they're talking about Native Americans, and it's like Catawba times. It's with pictures of actual human men and women of Catawba, it's like Catawba female, Catawba male. And so it's just this area because there was this whole belief of, you will take pictures of these people and you will get their price, their racial features and all this. So we worked recently with the American Philosophical Society to go through some of Frank G. Speck's works and say, okay, that's not a Catawba type, that's Martha Harris. But that kind of thing is also part of community creation. Naming places. This is what's happening in this photograph. This is what this person was talking about. John Lawson, famously born in Carolina. There's this bit in here about the game that he was watching the women play. Fried corn. You know, he couldn't ever quite figure out the rules to this fascinating game. And they were sorting corn seed. But he had no idea what he was sorting. So bringing that kind of information to other repositories, which, you know, helps the Catawba by putting that information out there. Real people, real happenings, still here, and it helps that repository because their records and metadata, everything is much more accurate. You know, this is Martha Harris. Harris was a potter. Martha, I can take you today and introduce you to an 18-year-old young man who's a brilliant potter in his own right, who was taught from her line straight down, generation upon generation upon generation. So Martha Harris, important not her name. She's not just a top type. So that's a big part of the work. Sometimes that goes well, sometimes not so well. My experience has been in the library, museums, and archives world, there has been a changing of the guard. And so a lot of relationships that were poisoned back in the day with kind of your stereotypical British museum, no, it's ours and we're going to keep it kind of attitude, with younger people with more awareness of the historical wrongs and cultural necessities. A lot of these relationships are getting a lot easier. And a lot of this rematriation work, co-curation work is becoming a lot more friendly and a lot more positive. And again, this is something where the digital world really comes in handy. Outreach and partnership with colonialist institutions, as kind of talked about. Different definitions of historically important. Because from the Catawba perspective, historically important is not so much this legal document, although that is, but sometimes making decisions about what gets deaccessioned and what gets kept, there is an entirely different kind of view or perspective that you have to follow. Because, yeah, this piece of pottery is kind of crappy, it's chipped, it's stained, much to do with it. It's a minor piece. It's the only piece that we have, and one of the very few surviving by Martha Jane Harris. So that's really important. That's more important than this document when I'm having to make this. Not all the time. You know, it's pretty much the same as you guys would say, but there are some different value assessments, I guess, we have to make. I get asked all the time, like, oh, you know, what's your pottery worth? And I go, well, this pottery's dead. So there will never, ever be another piece of pottery like this made. So, you know, I mean, sure, you can take it to somebody who will praise it and say, oh, for about $10,000 or whatever. But, you know, it's priceless because there will never ever be another Sarah Harris part on Sarah Harris, whoever. So, some different valuations you have to deal with. Keeping on my time. Okay, here's the elephant in the room. My number one most reliable funder, the funder that I have spent lots of people with, the funder that I've worked with for years, is the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Now, a lot of people don't know, it's not just libraries these people do. By statute, they are required to support Native American entities, tribes, particularly recognized tribes like the Catawba, with grants. In April, they canceled all of their Native American grants. Including they do a wonderful one that was the basic grant for Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, which was just $10,000, but all you had to do was apply. It was non-competitive. And, you know, we, of course, are in the process of appealing that, but I did want to mention their Native American, Native Hawaiian grants services were run by Indigenous people when they had their annual cycles. They invited various people to come to DC and to work as the peer review committees for those. So you had natives and native archivists and native librarians reading applications from native archivists and native librarians. So IMLS is very much missed. And we're very fortunate that our executive committee has been able to replace the funding we lost. Because of course, for us in this case, this was the last year for all the grants that they canceled. And none of them ran until December. So it was really kind of just odd, but there it was. We were told, of course, that we were no longer in lines with the policies of the United States, which went down about as well as you would expect. However, the Catawba Nation's response to the federal government suddenly becoming an unreliable partner was, yeah, okay. That tracks. So, but I did want to mention that. Other times we're living in, and we miss this partnership a lot and those people. So ATOM, which is the Association of Tribal Libraries, Archives, and Museums, Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, ATOM, which is the big international conference for Native archives and libraries and museums, will be very different this year without IMLS. So that was heavy. This is the state of Catawba Nation Archives when I came in 2020. My predecessors were not trained librarians or archivists. They did everything through conferences and through self-study, and they did an astonishing job. Everything was in proper archival storage. They did the best they could with the space they had, but there was no dedicated HVAC system. Space. It was 200 yards to the Catawba River in June. But thanks to their work, things were preserved. Now they weren't findable, they were discoverable. They were preserved. And there were just a ton of paper accession records, which sometimes were helpful and sometimes were not. So you could only access things on site. Access was limited because even the archivists didn't necessarily know how to put their hands on something. There's no real catalog or finding aids. There were a couple, but didn't cover the entire collection by far. Preservation environment was okay. There was an HVAC system, but it was old and certainly not up to the conditions. And the archives stacks are surrounded on two sides by a raw basement / crawl space, and that had not been mediated. But again, materials were properly enclosed in archival containers, and they were very good. I mean, they did an incredible job for people coming without any kind of professional education or training, and get to the point where they even knew the difference. Okay, this is either it goes to the buffer or the buffer. So I'm not at all casting shade at my predecessors. Without them, the archives wouldn't exist. All this stuff wouldn't be here today. So, but it was a road of work for us coming in. I came in with the nation in the fall of 2020, which was a fun time to start a new job. But again, the combination somehow had experience with epidemics before. And so it was very, very careful. So it was an interesting time to start a job because we're working where there's only one of us on site on any given day. And so it was basically just me in this building and then, lots of Zoom meetings. But the combination came through okay. We did lose a few people, but not nearly as much as some others did. So because the Catawba Nation's reaction was pretty swift. In 1759, there was a smallpox epidemic that in one summer killed at least half the tribe, if not more. And that is a huge blow as someone who's a historian, because that broke the oral tradition chain in a major way, because eldest and youngest were the ones hardest hit. And so it is a frustrating thing to be someone trained in kind of a Western historical tradition, because there are vast areas where we don't know, and we're never going to, because that's the fact of just dealing with oral traditions and that have been historically and horrifically broken. So with that aside, I get really heavy with these things. I'm sorry. But thanks to weirdly funding, we're able to get a new dedicated HVAC system for the archives, including dehumidification. We were able to mediate that basement space with rent drains and get it encapsulated. So now we're able to keep the archives at a consistent temperature and humidity level. Hooray! That was the first big thing. We replaced, which was, to be fair, old school archival shelving is that big heavy duty stuff that's not mobile, but the Gaylord cells and that, so which is now in a barn that we used to hold things out. But replace it with high density mobile shelving, so we could get as much as possible into our little space, which is always a concern. We instituted an ISAD-G and DAX compatible content management / I call it an OPAC, even though it's not a library system. So we have an online catalog, which also features our digital archives. I actually wound up partnering with a company in Great Britain. It's called Max Archive Services, which, because at the time we were instituting this, pricing for most services available from US vendors was based on number of users. You could only have X number of users per price point online at any given time. And Max Archive Services is now we just charge for storage. You can have 1 million people on this client. So they're great. They've been great people. They were very excited to work with the tribe. We were kind of their entry into the US. So that worked out well. Let me skip ahead here. So this is the front page of our website. This is Dryad. Max Archive, it's basically a WordPress shell, which means it's super easy to edit, super easy to change out images. It's super easy to put stuff on there about current exhibits and what we're doing. It is connected with the rest of the cultural center. It's very pretty. I like it. We use Atom, which is access to memory, which is its primary developer. It's open source. Its primary developer were indigenous coders and an indigenous company, which we liked. I love this system because, as I've taken a screenshot here, it does a lovely tree view of our archival hierarchy. You can see there, I'm logged in as me. This is an oral history that is limited to Catawba citizens. But you can see that little dark bar in the middle. You can play that oral history. And that's the other thing about Atom. It let me do layered access. So I can do random person who's scrolling the internet that doesn't have an account. You can see this stuff. Okay, person who has an account is not a citizen. Okay, you can see this stuff. And citizens, you can see pretty much everything except for stuff that's related to the blue thing. You can only see it over there. I was able to do that with Atom very easily, while still keeping it within DAX and ISAG, which was very important. There are some tribes who have enough knowledge preserved that they use different classification systems. I don't think Atom would necessarily, or even archive space would be necessarily the greatest thing for them. There is a push in Indian country to develop indigenous forms of classification. But the Catawba, again, surrounded very, very early, like by 1700, 1714, after the Yamasee War, the Catawba were surrounded by settlers. So if the Catawba ever had any kind of indigenous native organizational system, that and all the Catawba citizens today grew up with the decimal system, grew up with Library of Congress, grew up with all of the standard Western tranches. So while I did kind of go back and forth about seeing what kind of research could dig up, and there really wound up being nothing, but I landed on the side of the traditional Western arrangement because that's what the people I was trying to serve were going to know how to use. So, but anyway, Atom's great. It's very flexible. It's open source, which is great. I like the tree view, the layered access, and it lets me make metadata available even if you don't have access to the actual digital item or object. So you can go out there and go, oh, they have this. I can't get to it, but okay, it says here I should contact the archivist. And then we do have a route in place for outside researchers to get access potentially to things. It is a process. You wind up before the executive committee of the nation, but it's possible. So it was important to get the metadata out there so people would know what we had. This is Soteria Plus. This is kind of an overlay by Max Archives on Archivematica, which I love because it makes ingest so much easier. It fully integrates with Atom. It creates apes and dips. You put in the stuff, take your photograph, and it will your tip image that's your high-res master, and it will create a lovely JPEG of that for access. You can do your entire description and metadata there, and it will automatically populate it in Home. Send that the original to all of our backups, hot storage, cold storage, and so the Macs can usually do it on the LTO storage. And all I have to do is enter in that one place. It's an amazing workflow. I love it. This Soteria Plus is kind of an overlay for its user interface, which makes it a lot easier and nicer than just dealing directly with Archivematica. So that has made our digital preservation so much easier. This is the latest project that I have inflicted upon myself. Photogrammetry. So we have long partnered with the research labs of archaeology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. They have by far done the largest work for follow-up archaeology. They also serve as an off-site repository for us, particularly for handling things like human remains until we can rebury them. We simply don't have the proper facilities to store human remains. They do. It's there at Chapel Hill. So we worked with them and I trained with them. They have a wonderful photogrammetry lab. Basically, you have an object on a turntable, you have a really good camera, and you take, I don't know, 50 pictures from different angles of that as it rotates. What that does, it allows you to then use Agisoft Metascape is the software we're using, which stitches all those images together into a very high resolution, full color 3D model. And it is pretty amazing. You can rotate it. You can, for an example, a pot, you don't your top here, you can turn it up and you can go inside the pot. This was a big deal for me because I want pottery being so central to Catawba's heritage and survival. Literally Great Depression, the women would make pottery and they would go and it's outside the gates of Winthrop University because the women wouldn't let them go inside and sell their potteries. And so for many families, that was literally how they survived, was selling pottery to black people in exchange for food stuff or money in the Great Depression. So this way, artists, potters, Catawbas all over the world can see this stuff, can see the pottery, can see these objects, look at it from all the different angles, get really good close-ups with it. And as an archivist, I have to handle it as much. So that, kind of warms my archivist hearts too. So it helps protect and preserve the artifacts. But it's really neat. I'm just beginning on this. My 3D models aren't up to Carolina's standard yet, but I'm working on it with my camera and setup. So in future, we're probably going to be using Sketchfab for access. It seems to be, about this point, the best, easiest, cheapest option. And pottery is not really, the making of pottery and processing of the clay is sacred and secret, but the objects themselves are not. So the fact that it's public access is a bonus rather than a minus. Okay. Ongoing challenges. This, by the way, is Dr. Winona G. Hare, the first Catawba ever to get a dental degree, who is pretty much, for the past 30 years, she has been the driving force behind preserving Catawba culture. She is a phenomenal individual. She dedicates more hours of her life than she should to the Cultural Center and to our work. And yet she really was the one who decided this needed to be done in organized fashion 30 years ago and has cajoled, schmoozed, bullied, whatever she needed to do to make it happen. She is also just incredibly sweet and generous, and I'm incredibly fortunate to work with her and all the talented people, but I just love that picture of her. So future challenges, space limitations. Yes, even the high density mobile shelving did not give you the same size you want/need. So that is always a challenge. And of course, while there does appear to be some more space opening up on the reservation in the future, you immediately run into all that as a dedicated HVAC system. So it is issue on issue, but that is kind of an ongoing medium-term challenge. Staffing, it's me. I have some interns here and there, but they're very hit and miss. That's a big thing. Funding, always, like I said, IMLS went away. Right now, the CIN government's being very good to us, but like all governments, they are elected officials and they change. So we're working hard on doing some fundraising attempts and seeing what lands and what doesn't. Support from the government, digital preservation, always a thing. And, there are days where I long for the pre-digital world because I look at a piece of paper and go, man, it's so much easier just to preserve this physically instead of creating a whole nother object that I then have to preserve in a very expensive way. Because it's pricey. Probably my biggest annual expenses, that probably even better than overhead, are all of our digital stuff, storage, backups, the people who take care of the website and keep it maintained and updated, because I don't have time to learn that. It's an expensive process, unfortunately. Rematriation, federal government attacks on Native American programs and funding. We mentioned that. Small archive challenges, but thus far we've been able to meet them. Again, I say it's just me, but the entire team in the Cultural Center, we all work together on all of our projects. And we've been doing some amazing stuff. So I don't feel like I'm out on a limb by myself trying to, reinvent the wheel, which is lovely. So calls to action. What I did at the beginning here was called a land acknowledgement, which is the second least thing you can do whenever you're on native land, which in the United States is everywhere. Land acknowledgements are great, but they only go so far. I like things with calls to action. So you're all archivists, you all have materials. If you have native materials and you know which tribe they come from, reach out to that tribe, talk to them about it. If your institution is open to rematriation, repatriation, or co-curation, talk to the tribes, see if you can work something out. If you have Catawba type photographs of people that are actual human beings, but there are no names there, reach out to the tribes if you know it. See if you can't bring that information in. Build relationships with tribes, terribly nice people, particularly around the holdings that your institution has. Advocate for the use of traditional knowledge labels. I don't know how many of you are familiar with these. Traditional knowledge labels basically are an outgrowth of Creative Commons licenses. They do work with the U.S. copyright law. It's not giving anybody particular ownership, but it is a way to very quickly say, okay, the tribe has approved this is accurate, this is not accurate. You can Google it, traditional knowledge labels, TK knowledge labels. People behind that are brilliant. And they're a really effective way to cooperate with tribes for co-curation and for updating your collections. Support rematriation and repatriation efforts where you can, where you think it's right. Lobby the people you need to lobby, see how you can reach out and work with tribes, and decolonize your collections. And a lot of that sometimes really just is finding out who the people in those photographs are. Finding out what they're doing, realizing that that John Lawson's second voyage to the Carolinas, while a fascinating text with a lot of good stuff in it, gets a lot of stuff wrong, and letting people know that he gets a lot of stuff wrong. Realizing that Tom Bloomer's books about the Catawba are incomplete and get a lot of stuff wrong, and putting that out there and in front. So when somebody's looking at those materials, they go, okay, this is what it is. This was written by a white man in 1935. So decolonize your collections whenever you can. Okay, I promise I'm going to let you go here. One more thing. Recommendations. Catawba Indian Nation, catawba.com, Catawba Cultural Center. Come and see us Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5. The link for the archives is there. Decolonial Archival Futures is a great book by the Society of American Archivists. It's available at their store. And I recommend that if you have a way to get this book into your libraries, please ask them to do it. Becoming Catawba, Catawba Indian Women and Nation Building, 1540 to 1840, is the first history of the Catawba written by a Catawba. Dr. Brooke Bauer is currently at the University of Tennessee. This book is available wherever. It needs to be in every collection it can be in. Uh, Thank you very much. No, I'm about 5 minutes over and I apologize for that. Appreciate your attention. If you have any questions, you can find me. I know it's break time, so thank you.
We do have a few minutes for questions.
Oh, okay.
So, for those of you in the room, if you have a question, please raise your hand. You'll have to use the microphone. For our guests online, please type your question into the chat and we'll read it out. But do we have any questions for Inslee?
You were saying that you're very near the river. I wonder if you worry about flooding.
So, yeah, there's very famous 1916 flood, that damaged the reservation really, really badly. After that, Boots Power Dam is very placed along the river. So by and large, it's not terrible and it's not really, you don't worry about it. And the tribal land office has very clearly marked all the floodplains. They don't let people there. But during flooding, I mean, the river came up to like, we went out after we got back there and, you know, there were 12-foot tall mud marks in the trees. I mean, there's only one house damage because again, a lot of people built in floodplain. But, yeah, going down the trail, because the trail out behind the 12% of the river. And, yeah, it was kind of insane. Anybody else? Look, back. Like Tommy, did you see that? Remember Tommy? You said that.
I just wanted to mention another resource that you all might find valuable, which is called PMAM, the Protocols for Native American Archival Materials. You can Google that on SAA. They have a Native American Archives section. And a lot of those people and people who did the Indigenous Archival Training Program contributed to PMAM, so it has some really good protocols in there.
Yes, should have mentioned that for sure. I belong to that, working with the lady. So, yeah, that. Anybody else? They're gonna be calling my way. Good.
I just had a question about what your current relationship is with the collaborative students, and the archive students still interact with them? Or is it more just work?
I know a lot of college still are LDS members, and that's kind of the way that we interact with them is through tribal members. Like again, the biggest tranche of tribal genealogy has been done by people in LDS. The most accurate database of tribal genealogy, however, is not online. So, but they're very close to that. But yeah, that's more of my relationship. I do have a relationship with the curator at the History Center, the genealogist there, because I can send people to that there. But yes, generally through tribal members who have been very kind about giving me access to things when we get that. What else? Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Inslee. All right, so we have a short break. Don't worry about the time. The nice thing about me being in charge is, you know, we'll take a short delay if we need to. Just real quick, just so you know, I forgot to mention at the beginning, our sessions are in Joiner 1020, Joiner 2301, and Joiner 1615. Again, there are signs throughout the library, but just so you know, Joiner 2301 is here on the second floor in the back corner. 1020 and 1615 are downstairs. There are signs outside of the rooms. You have your QR code and you have the nice people with purple name tags. All right. Feel free to look at our posters. Feel free to visit our vendors downstairs, grab you some breakfast. Again, we can push back the start a few minutes. No rush. We're good. I want to thank Inslee for our keynotes. Thank everyone for joining us this morning, and I hope you have a great conference. Where is Dr.